Hello, fellow investors. Welcome to another episode of Ritter On Real Estate, where we teach you how to passively invest like a pro. Today, my guest is Tina Larsson. Tina is an entrepreneur, a business analyst, and a networker, and a self-described green queen, originally from Sweden. She now lives in New York, and she's moved from the hospitality industry to Wall Street and now to real estate. And Tina, she has her MBA from Pace University and also holds a lead green associate designation, which I think we're really going to dig into today and some green aspects. So Tina, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Kent, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, there's a lot of benefits to just going green, as you say, right? There's financial, environmental. I'm sure we'll talk through some more. But before we dig into all those details, do tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, thank you. So I have worked on Wall Street I had at the time for close to 20 years as a business analyst with the sole purpose of investing my clients' money in the stock market. But as a general analyst, you learn all kinds of industries. So right after the financial crisis, when we got a letter from our co-op board, and I'm in New York, which is why it's a co-op, but it could be a condo, and the legal differentiation doesn't really matter for our purposes. So we got a letter saying that they were increasing the maintenance by 5% for the 10th year in a row. During the financial crisis, there was no inflation. There is no reason to increase the fees by 5% every single year. In a co-op or condo, you might know that all that you have to do or all that the maintenance or common charges have to cover are the expenses. So this means that the expenses were increasing by that amount. So we organized, we spoke with some neighbors, and we put together a team and we took over the board. I didn't actually get on the board because my husband is, in both of our opinion, more diplomatic, shall we say. So he's the board president, and he's been the board president now for 10 years. But they asked me to head the finance committee, and in doing so, I did what I know from Wall Street. I learned how to analyze whether one particular cost can be $10,000. In insulation, you don't know if that's high, is that expensive, is that cheap, is that normal? So I did what I know. I gathered data from other buildings and put together comps for every single expense line item. And then we made some phone calls, we renegotiated some projects and some costs, eliminated some services that were paid for twice to different suppliers or vendors. And we were able to save the building $340,000 in the first 3 years.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Out networking, we know how everybody wants to meet another financial advisor, right? Well, maybe not where you are, Kent, but in New York City, everybody's a financial advisor or real estate agent. So instead of introducing myself as a financial advisor, I introduced myself and I helped my co-op save $340,000. And you wouldn't believe how many people said, "Can I introduce you to my co-op board?" Mm-hmm. And that's when we started our business. We realized that there was a need that the property managers were not fulfilling. And here we are, 7 years later.
Gotcha. So you've really come in as a consultant and focused on how do we reduce expenses, giving them data and kind of understand the programs that are out there to be able to do that.
Yes, exactly. And we project manage the entire process of implementing those projects. Mm-hmm. So if, let's say that we help them reduce how much energy they use or how much electricity they use in the basement, in their hallways. We come up with a plan that the board then approves, and then we bring in vendors, we get the proposal. So we basically do that portion on a project management basis that typically the property manager could do, but they are busy with all their regular work. So that would actually only be extra work for them.
Sure. Sure. Well, really interesting. So I'm sure you've learned a lot now that you've worked with many different buildings in different
Yes.
ways. And so, I know we talked a lot about even beforehand, kind of this idea of green certification and moving to be more green and more environmentally friendly. And so, I think I think we all know we should, I think most of us do at least, we should try to take care of the environment, right? It's kind of a, maybe a
Yes.
moral obligation, or at least something that we should do for our grandkids. But beyond that, what are some of the other reasons that owners should be interested in, say, going green?
I mean, think about it. Reducing carbon output or eliminating fossil fuels, it's going to reduce the costs. If you use half as much electricity or heating fuel, you're going to pay half as much as you're paying right now, right? So it's the cost, and then it's the environmental benefit, and then it's also on property values, because the young generation doesn't want to move into a building where they go down to the basement and the lights are on 24/7. And the statistics are that when you go down to a basement, that space is typically used by 10% of the time. So if
Mhm.
it's only occupied 10% of the time and the lights are on 24/7, then this younger generation, who is very environmentally friendly in general, and I'm generalizing, of course, they're not gonna, that's not a good thing. You want to market your building as something that's attractive to
Mhm.
buyers, and in doing, or renters, and in doing
Right.
so, you want it to be green.
Yeah, that younger generation must not, my kids must be in that next level of younger generation, because when I walk around my house, every single light in the entire house and basement, everywhere else is on. So they haven't quite got that memo yet, but
And then,
maybe they will catch on. But so in all seriousness, you're saying, I think we understand there's an environmental aspect, right? Which I think can play. Not only is it a good thing to do, but can also play into marketing. So there's a marketing aspect, as you said, right?
yes,
Attracting folks that are environmentally conscious and showing them that, they may want to live in a building that is being being environmentally responsible, right? And then obviously you have the hard dollars, right? You got the cost savings, which will flow down to your NOI, which will improve the value of your property, which as investors, as we all are, that's really what it's about, right? And so
yeah.
that's great. I think, yeah, those are obviously a lot of reasons to be focused on going green. And so if somebody is like me and says, man, I'm always looking for ways to improve my property, what are some of the ways that I can go about? Um, what are some of these initiatives, and what are some of the things that I can do to improve?
Well, one of them is as simple as, if you are in a multi-family building between 50 and 200 units, for instance, not limited to, but then if you go down to the basement, it is typically occupied 10% of the time. The LED technology has improved tremendously over the last few years. So even if you switched from 75 watts to, let's say, 26 watts per fixture a few years ago, now you can switch it down to 4 watts. So there's the LED technology, which has improved tremendously, but then the motion sensors have also gotten much better. So it used to be they went on sometimes and not sometimes, but now the adjustments that technology has also become much better.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a basement or in hallways, we don't, or even in the stairwells, the emergency stairwells, we do not see any reason why buildings should not be on motion sensors and on the newest technology using almost no electricity.
Yeah. And is it really, I guess I understand watts from how bright a light bulb is standpoint, but if I'm moving from, let's say, just round numbers, 80 to 4 watts. I mean, am I using 20 times less power in that light
You
bulb?
are, you are.
And I should see
We,
that flow through to the
on your
amount of energy that's
next,
being used, right?
on your next electricity bill, yeah, I mean, it's like this.
Yeah.
You put them in and the next one, you're good. Mhm.
So makes a ton of sense. Common areas. How are we just being smarter, right? So LED technology, motion sensors obviously makes a ton of sense. So electricity wise, how about on exteriors of buildings? I mean, kind of same concepts, or what are you guys seeing out there?
Yeah, so the exterior, so in New York City, a lot of buildings, there was a huge, I'm sure that it's the same everywhere in the nation, but our market is primarily in New York.
Mhm.
So all of these large apartment buildings, the local laws for repairing and inspecting the facades, they've been in place in New York City for the last about 20 years. So every 5 years, buildings have to inspect and repair their facades. So that's done on a continuous basis, and there are similar laws in other states. But the roof might very well be from when the building was built in 1910, 1930, or 1950s. There was a huge building boom back then too. And those roofs are old. They've been patched many times and repaired, but they don't have the right insulation to adhere to current energy codes. But they're still, I mean, they're there, so they don't have to replace them, but in many cases they should be replaced. And not only for energy efficiency, but also that there's so many times when we get phone calls from people, board members or owners, who say we've had leaks for the last 10 years, or since the day I moved in, or we always have leaks. And replacing the roof is a good way to get rid of leaks. But the parapet is a big one too. A lot of times the leaks are not actually from the roofs, or from the parapets. And that's a much larger project, as you.
So if you're, so just as far as kind of exterior, is the idea, so roof, but even insulation, it sounds like. So is there,
Yes,
the
roof insulation, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. So that's going to help, again, with your heating bills, which is driving a lot of it. What are some other things that we should be looking at on our properties?
Windows. But windows are very expensive. I mean, replacing windows is an expensive endeavor. Reducing how much energy you're using in the building there are building management systems where the boiler goes on based on the temperature, not outside. The old-fashioned way was that you said, okay, if it's 50 something degrees outside, then the boiler had to go on. But nowadays it's more sophisticated, again, with sensors. So a good building management system has sensors inside apartments, a few apartments, not all of them. And then the boiler is regulated based on the inside temperature as opposed to the outside temperature.
Gotcha. Is that something you can do wirelessly? Can you put sensors wirelessly in different apartments and have it kind of triangulate off of several properties to know when to run?
Yes.
And that's a good one. We actually have a property that has a boiler in it, and it's got a central thermostat right now. And so we've seen, one person's unit is 80 degrees, the other person's got 60. So that would be good for us to look into, some of these wireless sensors. Yes.
And sensors have become much more sophisticated over the last few years. I mean, there's huge improvements in that area. So nowadays they have these wireless sensors where you don't actually need a wire. And I don't know 100% the technology behind it, but
yeah, but we get it. You don't have to plug it in, right?
No,
you don't need the wire. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's great. I mean, I could see, because we experienced that, on a property that we took over. We've got, like you said, even from a tenant satisfaction standpoint, you don't want one person boiling and the other person freezing. So I think that's
and do you see that often? In New York City, we see that all the time in the winter when it's really, really cold. We'll walk by buildings and we see how many windows are cracked, and we're like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we happen to have one, we only have one property that has a boiler. But we just took it over a few months ago, and that's been one of the primary complaints, because the old owner just had a single thermostat in the unit that was we've the furthest from the boiler. So everybody in line in between is kind of getting roasted. So I think that could be a way to try to level that out a little bit. At least it's a good idea. So these sensors, basically, I think in general, if you have centralized heating with a boiler or something, being able to have these sensors, heat sensors in units to not just base it off of, like you said, external temperature, or even just where the boiler is located or something, base it off of a few different apartments.
Yes, but a longer term, better alternative is to electrify the building and get rid of the boiler altogether.
Yep. Yeah.
Do
you see a lot of people when they do that, just leveraging like baseboard heating?
I mean, that's a possible, that's an option, but then it's only for the heat.
Mm-hmm.
So you want them to be able to replace their air conditions as well as their heat, because the air conditions in reality are the biggest energy users.
Mm. So what's the most efficient way to do that?
So yeah, there are a few different ways to do it. And one way is, so the air conditions, if they're local air conditions not paid for by the building, but the individual unit owners. So let's say that you have an I'm looking here because my window is here. So you have an air condition through the window or through the wall, and the electricity is hooked up to the apartment owner or renter's own electricity bill, but it's still using a lot of energy. So the building is not very energy efficient. If you go to Energy Star, the building probably doesn't have very good Energy Star ratings. So you can replace that air condition and a heating system with a heat pump. It's more complicated. I mean, you have to find a location. Do you put one central heat pump? One unit has to be outside, and I'm pointing towards the roof because you put it on the roof. And then you have the units that go through. So there's a lot of wiring. I mean, there's a lot of retrofitting with it, and it's a big expense, but it's in many cases, it's a great alternative. And that space is also becoming more and more efficient. But I mean, in Europe, it's the main heating and air condition. Heat pumps is what they've been using for decades there, and that's what they're using for the most part. Whereas here, I read some statistic the other day where less than 3% of New York State uses heat pumps.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is in your area.
We've had, and we've replaced a few heat pumps on properties. I know that they can be pricey. But I mean, long term, does the economics work out? Is it worth it in the long term, or is it more an environmental play?
And it's also a comfort play. So does the economics work out? I would think so.
Yeah.
But it is expensive, so the payback period is long. But for instance, in New York City, they passed a green law in 2019, where they're going to fine all buildings, not only multifamily, all buildings, including commercial and smaller and walk-ups, etc. They're going to, or over 25,000 square feet, it is actually. They're going to fine them hundreds of thousands of dollars per year if they do not meet a certain Energy Star score.
Wow.
Yes, which really accelerates, and the fines are starting in 2024, but we're not seeing that many buildings being fined at, but in 2030, 80% of buildings, if they do nothing now, they will get huge fines. And then it's going to escalate because New York City's goal is to go carbon neutral by 2050.
Wow. So yeah, so some government regulation that's kind of creating incentives to do some of these things as well, which may start in New York. We may see that spread
And
somewhat. You never know. So I think good to have the information.
yeah, and that would not surprise me. I mean, traditionally, California has been the most energy proactive state. But in this particular case, New York was the first one, is my understanding.
Sure. Sure. Gotcha. Okay. So we kind of hit on lights. That kind of seems like a no-brainer. I think as you get into some of the HVAC or the heating and cooling, there's opportunities there, but maybe not as easily implemented, right? Maybe more of a capital expense. What about talking about water? What about water conservation?
Water conservation is a very big portion. And think about it. So most of the water, yes, is used for cold water because the toilet is actually the biggest water user. But when it comes to hot water, which the shower and faucets and the shower primarily, or bathtubs, they use the most hot water. So there's the cold water and the hot water. So for cold water, you only have the cost of water. When it comes to the hot water, you have both the cost of water and the cost of heating that water. So it used to be, and I don't know, the standard prior to 1990, I believe, the standard toilet size was over 3.5 gallons for one flush. Nowadays, there are toilets out there that are 0.8 gallons per flush. And they are typically, so there are two items that are really good about these toilets. I mean, think about it, and it's 1 for 1. So you take 3.5 gallons per flush toilet and you 0.8, so it's 75% savings or 80%.
Yep.
So there's that. And then according to the EPA, 6% of water use comes from leaks. And in many cases, those, or a very big portion of that, leaks come from the toilet flapper.
Yep.
Which apparently you're supposed to change all the time.
I've experienced that on property as well, where we've had, water bills 2-3 times what we expected. And turns out it's a simple toilet leak that the tenant never reported. Maybe the toilet was leaking for 3 weeks, just running the whole time. And so, it amazed me how much of an impact a leaky toilet could have on your water bill.
I know. Yeah. And we see that all the time too. And then but the new toilets, they do not have a flapper. And we get a lot of people say, oh, I don't want less of a flush, then I have to flush twice. Nowadays, they're vacuum assist. So again, the technology has really improved to make the toilets much more efficient.
Yeah.
And the same for showers. You have the aerator that can go with the new shower heads. They reduce water use substantially by up to 50%. And the aerators that you can put in, and you don't have to change the design of your actual kitchen or bathroom faucets. You can install this aerator together with your existing faucet.
Gotcha.
And that's another great way to save money too.
So it sounds like both from an electricity standpoint and from a water standpoint. I mean, if you were to switch out kind of original fixtures in both senses with new modern, you could be decreasing anywhere from 50 to kind of 75% usage for both electricity and power, it sounds like, or electricity and water, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And heating.
Right. And so, I mean, it seems like obviously, seems like obviously the way to go. I mean, kind of why wouldn't you do that? Are there any downsides that we need to be aware of, or any kind of gotchas that people may not think about in doing these programs?
No, I mean, it's really as simple as you install it and you will see the savings. The biggest resistance is that people don't, or boards at least, they don't want to spend the money. And I'm
Mhm.
assuming it's the same for property,
Mhm.
multifamily property owners, that it's.
Yeah, I mean, everything's got to be, everything's got to, you've got to play your budget into every decision, right? So I guess that's a good point. Like, what is the turnaround or payoff time, kind of payback time you see on some of these initiatives?
So when it comes to the electricity in the common areas, basement and hallways, the payback period is very often as low as two years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When it comes to the heating plant, it's 6+ years.
Okay.
And water is also, some of the water measurements are also very short, a shorter period,
Yeah.
depending on, but it depends on your situation. Okay, so do you have 1.78 gallons of toilets, or do you have 3.5, or do you even have 5? I saw a 5.5 gallon toilet the other day.
Yeah, yeah, just dumping buckets down there.
Yeah. So I mean, it depends. We don't know until we look at it too.
Sure, but it sounds like significant savings. I mean, if you think about,
Absolutely,
water bills at a property, I mean, it's multiple tens of thousands of dollars for utilities. I mean, for the properties that of the size that we're running, yearly. And so if you think about, if you could cut 80% or even 50% off of that, I mean, that's a savings. And maybe you're saying, well, we're not worried about that because we have a RUBS program where we're billing back utilities to our tenants. I guess my argument would say, well, I think that's marketing. I think it's a marketing opportunity to tell people, well, if you move here, your water bill or electricity bill, utilities are going to be half the price at a competing property, and you're able to pass that savings, back onto the tenants. And I think, that there may be an opportunity to make that, to increase revenue in other areas because you're not financially burdening them so much because of utilities. So I think if you think broader about it, I think you can make it make economic sense as well as environmental sense.
Yeah. And just because you pass it on to someone else doesn't mean that it's, and if you don't pass it on to them, then you should be able to, then property values are going to increase, or they can pay more in rent because now they're not paying it to Con Edison or PG&E or Illinois, whatever they're called there.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, and I guess that's the point I'm trying to make, because I know a lot of people, most operators nowadays, the tenants pay the utilities. So I mean, I've heard that pushback on sometimes on these type of initiatives. Well, we don't pay for them anyway. But I think the responsible thing to do, you put it in place, you pass those savings on. And, I think you can see value there. I think as people are weighing their budgets, they've got to say, okay, where, there always has to be that return on your investment, right? So I think thinking more broadly about that, people can still see the value here, because I think clearly there is. And I think when you think about common areas, that's a no-brainer. I mean, the landlord is always paying the common areas. You talk about LED lights. I mean, that's something that we do on all of our properties. That's a really simple fix, and some of the toilets and things we do more as we always replace with a newer, better product. But yeah, I think there's, there's obviously a lot to be done. I mean, a lot of apartment buildings that were built in where we are is 60s and 70s. And then into the 80s. In New York, obviously it's a little older, but even back in those times, I think there's a lot of opportunity to come in with these different conservation initiatives.
Yeah, 60s and 70s, it's still, the elevator is old, the roof is old, facade is old.
And so what are some,
Sorry.
They are. No. So is there anything else that we haven't covered? Any other ways or things to focus on?
Well, another thing that we're doing in New York is developing the rooftops. I don't know how it is in your area.
Well, most of ours are mostly pitched roofs.
They are.
Yeah, a little bit different than New York,
Well, then you can put solar panels on them.
Yeah, so solar is another opportunity. I mean, how have you seen solar develop? Have you seen many applications for that?
No. So one of the problems with solar, I mean, there's not a problem with solar, but the problems with solar in high rises.
Mhm.
So if it's a building that's only 6 stories tall, maybe, then you have generally more area, more roof area to install so that the solar that you can fit on a roof will cover a larger portion of the electricity.
Mhm.
Whereas as in a 20-story building, the roof compared to how many units is
Yeah,
very
still only so
small.
much roof, right?
Yeah, so one of the buildings that we did install solar on, and we actually, have you seen those very cool water towers that we have in New York City? I don't know if you have
Mhm.
them in your, yeah. So we actually install a solar panel on the water tower, on the south side of the water tower,
Mhm.
and then it's slanted out, and it actually is built out to be the shading area for the roof garden, so that people can sit in a shady area.
Mhm.
And the whole solar system, or not system, but panels, they cover 25% of the common area electricity. So not 100%, but
Yeah.
25% is better than nothing. And it's just really cool. And it's my understanding, it's that it's the only New York City building that has the solar panels on the water tower. So it's very cool.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, solar is something that I guess I've heard traditionally has been kind of price, again, prohibitive. I imagine that's come down a good amount, but yeah, it's something, I think, an application on a property, especially a larger garden style multifamily where you have a lot of roof, right? You got maybe a 2-story building with a lot of roof. There could be maybe an application there.
And now we have Tesla making roofs and solar panels all in one. Have you seen those?
I have seen those.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be interesting too. So I think, I mean, the good news is there's a lot of opportunities to think creatively about how to save both the environment and some of your either yourself or your residents, pocket change. It seems like we can hit it from kind of, all these different angles. Some are quick hits, some are take a little longer, but I think if you're looking at it from a value add renovation, definitely looking at LEDs, looking at the heating systems that are being used, looking at the toilets and the faucets and the water. And then if you're looking at new development, I mean, I think that really opens things up to type of material you're using, type of insulation you're using, even the type of roofs you use, right? Different things. So a lot of different ways to approach this, Tina.
Yeah.
As we start to wrap things up, anything else that our viewers or our listeners should know?
What should I know? Well, they can connect with me on LinkedIn because I'm been super active on LinkedIn. I give away lots of free tips for multifamily owners, operators, and co-op and condo boards. My LinkedIn URL is Tina Larsson. That's 1 R, 2 S's, ONLI. I guess someone else took Tina Larsson. Our website is thefolsongroup.com, and on our website we have a free tools page where you can download free tools when it comes to energy efficiency, facade repairs, and just some great board practices.
Okay, well, great.
And yeah, and that's it.
Well, good. Well, before I let you go, I do have a few more questions I want to ask. I want to take you through our keys to success round. And there's 4 questions I want to ask you. We ask every guest. First one is, just take the first thing that comes to your head. If a lot of our listeners are investors themselves, they're investing, with other folks. And so if you were going to invest your money with someone else, in a deal that they had, and you could only ask them one question, what's the one question that you would ask them?
Their end goal, so that I would know if our values align with their values.
Gotcha. Very good. What are you most proud of in your career?
Most proud? What am I most proud of? It's a I should have listened to these questions, looked at these questions beforehand. What am I most proud of? I am most proud of continuing to grow and develop as a person, and of my network. I have an amazing network that are so supportive of me, and I am very involved in my network.
Awesome. What is a book that everybody should read?
That is, and I know that some people love it and some people hate it, the 10 times rule. Have you seen? No, it's the 10-time rule, I guess it's called, with Grant Cardone.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
Have you read it?
I have not.
It is good. It's very intense. He's very intense.
Yeah, no, he's a fantastic motivator. And so
yes,
I'm sure that's a great one to check out. And lastly, what is your number one key to success?
My number one key is that I don't accept status quo. And I am passionate about making every single building in New York City greener, more sustainable, and more affordable.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you got your work ahead of you with those regulations that are coming down and those fines. So sounds like you'll have no shortage of clients beating down your door to get you to help them with that. But appreciate you sharing some of the knowledge you've learned in New York with some of the folks in other parts of the country. I think lessons that we can learn, things to get ahead of. And I know that we have your info and your website and your LinkedIn. We'll make sure all that's listed below so that folks can reach out to you, Tina. And thank you for coming on and sharing so much knowledge today. And we hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Kent. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.